the Thera Podcast. If you're a therapist, educator, counselor in training, or anyone interested in therapy, this is your epicenter for everything you should know. There are so many people in the world going through extreme mental and emotional issues, and we want to spotlight all the things we believe that work and the things that don't. They are wise sages, caring, intelligent, and are leaders in mental health counseling. The Thera Podcast. And here they are, Drs. Martin Wesley and David Whittinghill.
Welcome to the Thera Podcast. This is Dr. Martin Wesley, and I also have our other host here, Dr. David Whittinghill. How are you, David?
I'm fine, Marty. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about, sometimes I think we're just having fun and talking about some of the current events. And this one's somewhat current, but the issue is this is a very important topic because it's, what is the phrase? Death and taxes. We're good. And we won't talk about the taxes part, but we will talk about the death part, I think. I literally, as we're talking, I have my aunt Marilyn is literally, she could die actually while we're doing this podcast. She's literally within hours of dying. And so that even brings it a little bit emotional for me because, she has been an influence on me while we moved away from Kentucky when I was younger. And so, but she was still, in contact with us quite a bit. But, she did have a great impact on my life and those around her. So that is quite, tugging at my heart right now, obviously, with that. But the other aspect is just, again, I wanted to talk about losing colleagues and how that has impacted us over time and how we deal with that in academia or as a counselor even. So,
Sure, Marty. And I hope the best for you and your family as you go through this.
Well, thanks, David. Yeah.
As you know, I've experienced quite a bit of death in my life. And so I have a lot of empathy for folks that are going through the same process. And I did not know the other faculty member who passed away.
Yeah.
But I know it affected you and Laura a great deal.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, let's actually, introduce our guest also, and we'll start with Dr. Laura here. How are you, Laura?
Hi, Dr. Marty, thank you so much for having me. You shared with me a little bit about your aunt yesterday, and she sounded like a really special person. So your family is in my heart and thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. And we also have the one and only Jerry Juhnke. How are you?
Marty, I am doing great. Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to be on this podcast. I think this is a really pressing issue. If it's something folks have not experienced, they will experience.
Yeah.
We don't do a good job preparing ourselves or our students for our passings or passings of other faculty members. We have a belief in Western culture that we're going to live forever and we're going to work forever. And when people go into our desks after we pass and they see all the stuff we've got in there and all the things that we've got, because we just don't prepare for somebody to, come in and take over for us. But it's difficult. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just to me, again, we just had to deal with this. Laura and I did. And we also have one other guest that we actually had to inform in some ways because she was actually in one of the classes that we were, that was coming up right away. But hey, how are you doing, Victoria? Victoria Henderson.
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here, excited to learn, and also to share. I agree with the sentiments that have been shared. This is not the easiest thing to talk about, but I do believe that it is necessary. It's a part of our human experience, and learning how to navigate that, I believe, kind of helps us to deal with the pain or the sting of loss better. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just introduce that first. So to start with, let's talk about Dr. Donna Kirkpatrick Penson. She was a faculty member with Laura and I. And what else you want to say about her, Laura? Just to introduce her.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I was going to say not going to cry during this, but I likely will, and I'm glad for this opportunity. This is appropriate. Jerry, I want to echo what you said about how we treat death in this culture and sort of this expectation around, hey, that was a week ago. Has your department moved on? And that's been incredibly hard. But Marty, to answer your question, Dr. Donna was like a very large force of nature in a small body, as I experienced her. She was really just a rock star, and I am feeling that loss heavily. I'm feeling that loss every day. I just started to send an email and put her in the subject line, and it's, those moments kind of almost catch you off guard.
Yeah. Exactly. And here she was such a, like you say, a strong force within our profession, counselor, because again, she was a school counselor for quite some time, and then she became a counselor educator. She was in a wheelchair, had MS, and no one knew it. That's what's crazy about that is while some of us did, most of her students, because they were looking on a screen, didn't see the wheelchair and didn't know this. And they all thought that she had not only the strength of her personality, which just exuded from her, and the internal locus of control that just, couldn't help but being shared. And yet they didn't realize that she had a frail body, and frail immune system. And ultimately, just simple COVID and flu ended up taking her life. And this happened about 3 weeks ago or so. And literally, Laura and I heard about this while we were just chatting on Zoom. And we got the text. And I read it off to Laura, and of course, it just shocked us. But the crazy thing is her class was going to be starting in just an hour, a little over an hour from that time. And so not only are we trying to process this because, obviously she's a dear friend, but, Laura's the chair of the department, and I'm hopefully a help to her. But we, how do we handle this when we're dealing with students coming up?
Big help, Marty.
What's that?
You're a big help to me. Yeah. And, and I think that's part of what's important in this conversation is sort of being the leadership, sort of being the communicators of this, and then navigating your own grief. And I guess I never expected that to happen or that I would be in that position. And I really hope others can think about this beforehand in a way that I didn't. Because I will say that I think I subjugated a lot of my feelings to get through figuring out things, reassigning classes, notifying people, all of that. And then it was about delayed. It was like 2 or 3 weeks later where it hit me. And I started grieving. And I felt like a lot of other people had sort of gone over the hump of where I was already, if that makes sense.
Don't believe it. They didn't get over the hump already. Everybody compartmentalizes all this. Hats off to both Marty and you, Laura, because this grief process takes long. It's like nausea. You think you're over it, and it comes back out of the blue when you're not expecting it.
Right.
And it's especially difficult for faculty members because we're trying to take care and we're all counselors, right? So what are we trying to do? Our first thing is we're trying to protect everybody else.
Mm.
We're not trying to process it or protect ourselves. We're trying to protect our students. And Victoria, you might get a smile over this or you might not, but what happens is faculty immediately jump in to help master's students to process this. They kind of think that doctoral students are going to make it through this all right, that they're a little bit older, that they've gone through this probably before, and you jump in to help master's students. And many of our master's students are quite vulnerable in a lot of ways. I remember during COVID speaking, I used to call my students at least 3 or 4 times a semester. And I remember calling one student who was on her way back from an area in Texas, and she started crying. And I thought my phone call elicited the crying. And I said, no, everything's okay. Everything. And she said, it's not okay. I just buried my grandma, my aunt, my mom. This was during COVID. And she said, Dr. Juhnke, I don't know if I can continue on. And this master's student, who was quite incredible in so many different ways, she was struggling with this. And I know I have experienced the loss of a number of faculty members who were friends, some faculty members who were acquaintances. When I was at UNCG, one of the most difficult struggles for me was when Nicholas Vack passed away. He was a mentor to me. He was just an incredible person. I remember being asked to kind of clean out his desk or his office, and he had pictures of the faculty, the current faculty, and underneath that he had pictures of previous faculty that were taken, and that was his whole life. That really was.
Wow.
Dr. Thelma Duffy was a professor with me here at University of Texas San Antonio for
Wonderful person.
a number of years. She was department chair. I can't remember the number of years she was chair, but it was like 10, 12 years. And when she passed away unexpectedly, Dr. Heather Trapal took over, and then they put me in as an interim chair after that. And that summer, we had one of our lecturers pass away, who the students loved. So you had students who were just really reeling from all this. You had faculty who were really reeling from all this. And fortunately for me, I was surrounded by incredible colleagues who were very loving and kind, and an incredible dean. Our dean immediately called our EAP services. We had EAP programming for our students. We had EAP program for our faculty. And he was at every one of those meetings. I don't know how he made the time for that, but he was at every one of those meetings. And so I see how UTSA processed it, and what a great job my dean did, and the faculty. We're just never prepared for it. We're just never prepared for it.
You bring up something too, Jerry. I want to also talk about just, when we almost replace someone, which I want to get to in a little bit, but I wanted to go to Victoria. How did we do? I mean, again, I know you were in one, I don't know if it's the first class, Victoria, I don't remember, or the second one we went to after that. I know we had a class at 6:30 and then we had one at 8 that night. And again, from your perspective, how did that go?
Yeah, I'm certain that it went very well. I think to Dr. Juhnke's part where he mentioned that, sometimes doctoral students are kind of like looked over because the assumption is that we navigate it a bit differently. Thankfully, I didn't have that experience. Like I definitely felt as though, and like, I typically don't like to speak on behalf of like others, but I think in talking with some colleagues, we all talked about how supported we felt in that space, in the sense of it was very like open to allowing us to just be. Right. Like I think I kind of echo some of the same sentiments of like, we didn't really expect it. And I think initially my train of thought, because the day prior I had just lost my aunt unexpectedly to a heart attack. So I think because I was already in like this state of like shock, but also like numbness, I think when I heard it, it was just a moment of like, I just froze. Like it didn't compute, like it didn't register that that's what was happening in real time. And I feel like just kind of listening to how you all navigated the conversation and kind of affirming that it's okay to feel like what we feel. I think I just really locked into that and giving myself the permission to fall apart if I needed to. I am an emotional person, but I don't like being emotional in front of a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think after I stepped out of the shop, my thought was like, you are not going to break down on the Zoom with all of these people. Some some you've never seen before. But just listening to how you all navigated that conversation and the vulnerability that you both showed, I felt safe enough to present my authentic feelings and like exhibiting that sadness and giving myself that moment. And so I appreciated how we had the space to be authentic, to be vulnerable, but also the opportunity and the space to honor her as well. And one of the things that I shared that still sticks with me to this day, because there are still moments where it still doesn't feel real. Like Dr. Laura was talking about going to email her, and I had that moment last week to update her on something. And then it kind of clicked on me of like, oh man, like I can't like do that anymore. But yeah, it still doesn't feel real. Like Dr. Wesley, even listening to you mention like that was 3 weeks ago. I don't know what it is about grief that kind of morphs time, and it makes you feel you're in this like bizarre twilight zone where it just kind of feels like it's hard to distinguish like what's real versus like what's not. And then there's this pressure to kind of continue to like navigate forward and like, okay, well, life kind of goes on. So balancing that duality of like making room for my humanity and grieving while also I still have to show up. Like there are still things that I kind of have to accomplish. But I really feel like you all navigated that moment in a way where it kind of settled me in the sense of I was able to really embrace that like grief isn't a problem that needs to be solved, but it's an experience that we carry. And I think that reminder has been what has helped me for the past several weeks. And like in her memory, Dr. Penson's memory, as well as in the memory of my aunt, in the sense of this isn't something that I have to work to get over. But every day I'm making the decision to show up, and in showing up, I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be authentic. And so if it's a rough day emotionally, that's okay. If it's a day where I'm able to be a bit more productive, that's great as well. But I just appreciated the safety to allow us to kind of grieve as a community, because I couldn't imagine receiving that news any other way. Like if we got that in an email to be isolated in our grief, that would have been like, it was already devastating, but I felt like it would have been 20 times as worse. So I think that you all navigated that well, especially because like both you and Dr. Laura had a closer relationship with her. Like she wasn't just a colleague, she was a friend. And so I felt like we were all grieving her loss in different capacities, but I had such a respect for you both because you all in that moment like found a delicate balance of sharing your grief and your sadness, but also holding space for ours as students. And so I don't know how you both did it. I think it's really a testament to both of you all's capacity, not just as counselors and educators, but as humans. And the fact that there is a kindness and there's a compassion that you both embody. And so although that experience was devastating, I'm grateful that you two were kind of spearheading that moment.
What wisdom, Victoria. Holy moly. You are just wise beyond your years.
Oh, thank you.
That is incredible. And what kudos to you, Martin and Laura. I mean, it sounds like you did an amazing job. So, and I know some folks who've encountered this and things didn't go very positively. So it just speaks highly of you and your program and what you did and of your students. My goodness.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. And thanks, Victoria. I think a lot of it was Laura and I had, a few minutes, but we had to make a decision very quickly. And again, I think part of it is based on our poor experiences from other situations where we have gotten those emails. And what was, I guess, really tough too was that was not our decision. That was totally our decision. We didn't have to go through anyone. We knew what we had to do for the classes. The issue came later, I think, when we're navigating wanting to memorialize Dr. Pence in a way that was respectful to everyone, and hopefully, again, that her memory isn't lost in the shuffle of trying to replace faculty and trying to replace, what is the next assignment and things like that. And in that process, I think we got a lot of support from our own administration, but we also realized that we're on our own to make that happen, if that makes sense. We realized that there's no support for us, and we'll get resources in an email, which is fine. I'm glad for that. But we needed to spearhead the whole thing, and realizing there wasn't a template for this.
Yeah.
Right, Laura? We had to make this up as we went along, because no one had ever done this in a virtual sense for a virtual faculty member, in a sense.
Right. And Victoria, I want to thank you for all of your kind words. I'm real good at like being the Monday morning quarterback and thinking of all the things I could and should have done differently. And I really would urge anybody listening to this to really follow what Jerry talked about with having EAP folks available. I wish that would have occurred to me, and I wish I would have done that. And I also want to touch on this virtual thing. Even though I spoke with Dr. Donna multiple times a week, I've never been in the same room with her. Physically, I've never been in the same room. And how nice it would have been at the moment of loss for us all to be together, and that human connection, giving a hug, having like food there, because I like food.
Yeah.
Food is, represents a lot. We didn't have it, and we do the best we can without it. But I felt that absence.
No, I hear you. And I think that speaks a little bit for the whole format. At the same time, the biggest thing for me, whether it's a virtual setting or in class or even asynchronous, which I don't know how the hell people do that, but the issue is doing the best you can, making use of the resources in which was available to us, So.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed with that, Laura. And when you talk about food, I'm a former chef. And so food is very intimate, and it creates an environment where you're sharing and you're talking as you're eating. No one just sits and eats, and it's usually talking. And that's why people like to go to coffee, or at least why I like to go to coffee with people like David and Marty, and now with you and with Victoria as well. We're just not going to sit and drink our coffee and not talk to each other. We're going to interact. And I think that's what makes it human. For me, there was something that I encountered that I wasn't expecting. So I used to do a lot of work with post shootings in schools. And so what you see with schools, when you step in to the property because you've been asked to be there, you bring your team in. I had a crisis team we used to bring in from UNCG, which was pretty much all my doctoral students and advanced master's students, and we'd step into a property, and oftentimes the principal was there, unless the principal was shot, and then associate principal, and a lot of really bad things. But what would happen is the students would kind of sector everybody on off. They protect their own. Mm-hmm. And what they were doing was they were making sure that the most vulnerable there at school weren't harmed by outsiders. And at one place in particular, they had television announcers across the street coming onto campus, asking kids questions, totally inappropriate. It was early on in the whole student shooting scene, and it was horrible. And I remember being confronted by like a group of 6th or 7th graders checking me out to want to know who I was and what I was doing there, and to get off their property. They owned that. That was their way of protection.
Wow.
But I did experience some of that with faculty, because faculty were very supportive of one another, and nothing negative here, but it was kind of like, okay, we should know how to get through this because we've got a PhD. We should know how to handle this, and we're counselors. We do this stuff. But what gets mixed sometimes are two different things. One is protection of each other. You could see faculty trying to protect those who are experiencing the most difficult times, and then not only protecting, but the idea that we should have the answers because we have doctorates. I'm sorry, I didn't have the answers. And I frankly don't think at that moment I could have been a counselor. It was more me going through something. And I think we have to lay aside that I'm a counselor educator or I've got 37 years worth of clinical experience. Or we have to lay that aside and just say, this is what just happened to me. And this is very real. And I'm going to protect the people around me. But I'm also going to have my own time to get through this. And Laura, I was so pleased when you talked, I use the word compartmentalize, but that's probably a pathological term and it wasn't meant to, be said in a negative way. I'm so sorry if I offended you or hurt you in any possible way. But I think we've got to do that in a way to be able to move forward. Yes. I remember having students after the death of this lecturer in our program who was, we had just had the death of, or the passing of Dr. Duffy, who was so loved by faculty and our students. She's was a past ACA president. She was, the creativity group. She was the editor for the Journal of Creativity. I mean, she was incredible. And we went through that. And then to have this death of a lecturer within a few months of that and the students' reaction. I remember students coming to my office and, some had anger, and I don't think it was real anger. The anger is trying to, they don't want to show their sense of loss. So they can easily get anger, and that's kind of protective. But anger, how could this happen again in our faculty? How could we have 2 significant losses within a year? How could we? And it was like, I didn't have answers. I wanted to give them answers. And that's why I went back at the beginning about we just never prepare for this and really have to think about, okay, how is it that we're going to respond to these things and have at least some kind of policies, templates in line. And I think we are at a point that we can do that and be helpful to other counselor education faculty and other department faculty. Mm-hmm. So, and it doesn't have to be so detailed that it's specific it's just got to be some outlines. And, and like you said, Laura, the idea of my dean, I wouldn't even have thought of getting EAP involved. Right from the get-go, he had the EAP involved. Right from the get-go, they had an associate, I can't remember what her title was, but she contacted me related to programming for our faculty. Just incredible things that they did right off the bat. So I'm hoping that as we talk about these things, people can think, okay, so how would I handle this at my institution if this happens? What are we going to do? How are we going to handle that?
2 politically incorrect counseling professors and therapists with never-ending experience and wisdom who are proud to be politically incorrect. You're listening to the Thera Podcast. Now, back to your hosts, Drs. Martin Wesley and David Whittinghill.
Well, the hard part, I think, and I know, Laura, you were dealing with this, and I'm sure all of us have, but the issue is I heard that, Donna died, but you do need to get me that schedule in by 8:00, or something crazy like that. And you're going, come on, for God's sakes, have a little compassion. But the systems seem to want to continue to roll when it's not a time to. And the systems need to have some kind of leeway for that.
Yeah, Marty, absolutely. And I was, thinking about what that would be like if we were in a brick and mortar setting and IT said, you need to bring us her computer or things like that don't happen in the actual world. Exactly. But you're right. I think I really had a moment of, that was one of the hardest moments in all of this, is that I received an email from an office that will remain nameless, sort of with a tone like, hurry up and get this to us. And I said, do you realize a member of our department just died? And I got a 2-word response. So sorry. And I don't know. I know people don't know what to say sometimes, but I my hope moving forward is anytime there's a death, even if I don't know the person, I reach out to that department and say, man, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. And I'm aware of what you're going through. Because sometimes the silence and the not hearing anything from somebody feels really, really bad.
Yeah. David, what have you had? I know you've had a lot of experiences with death, obviously, from your younger or your brother to family, but what about colleagues and students and things too?
Yeah, sure. Not only for my brother, he died when I was 12, but as a teacher, while I was at the University of Florida, we lost a student in the class.
Yeah.
And that was a very difficult thing to process with the class because she was there 1 week and then the next week she was gone. In fact, when I read it in the newspaper, I was saying, University of Florida is such a big place. Her name was a very common name, like Pam Smith or, So I expected there would be more Pam Smiths in all of the students at University of Florida, but it turns out that this particular person was actually in my class, and then when I came to class, the empty seat was a reminder to all of us, and then we processed as best we could her death.
Yeah.
It was not easy. I broke the class up into several groups and allowed them to process this whole thing as best I could. Because it's not easy for 18, 19-year-olds to even come to terms with that, to even, another student died. Could this happen to me? What were the circumstances? Why? All those questions came out. And so it was a difficult time. And I'd say it took the class probably about 3 other meetings before it kind of settled in into our realities. Of course, I've also lost a wife. And that was probably the most wrenching of all the deaths I've gone through. And she was given, my wife had lung cancer and was given 6 months to live. And that was very hard because my son was only 4 years old. And to explain, he didn't know what was going on. And trying to keep it together for him and then still teach. It was a very difficult time for me. I wish at that particular time there had been more support from, administration at that time for me. I don't begrudge anybody there for not knowing what to do. I don't think most of us know what to do, but there wasn't much in that regard. Most folks just stayed away.
Yeah, and that's sometimes the easiest answer is, for most people, and it shouldn't be for counselors, but often I've even seen it with counselors. Sometimes, whether it's their own personal fear of death, I don't know, but there's something going on within people. Laura and I we've actually bonded, unfortunately, over some colleagues over the years. Dr. Barry Stevens, just such a great friend. Did you know him, Jerry?
I did. I did.
Yeah. Well, you know who I'm talking about then. Oh my God. He was just again, what can I say? Here's what he was. He was older than I was. And, he was just, the greatest person ever. he actually asked me, by the way, Marty, I need someone to be accountable to. I want you to be that person. I want to meet once a week and I want to be accountable to you. I mean, here he is asking me. It should be the other way around. And of course, I was with him too. But the issue is what a great lesson I learned from that, where we all need to be accountable to some great colleagues. And unfortunately, it wasn't long and he was struggling with death. Laura was very close to him. Troy and Gentili, which is a friend of ours, also very close. And the way that he was literally fired. He was literally fired when he was dying. And that killed him personally. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you right now, I had more respect from Laura during that time because she told the president what she really felt. I'll never forget that day. And I think you left primarily because of a lot of that was going on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That was a struggle. But we also just recently had a good friend and, Kim Noggle and Barry, and Larry Sexton, which you probably knew too, Jerry.
I didn't know Larry had passed. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, you didn't know? Yeah, he just passed a year ago. Yeah. It was a sudden thing. He literally just lost his daughter. And within a few days, he had cancer. And anyway, it lasted less than a year or right at a year. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I just have to speak up. Who fires somebody as they're dying?
That was I can't even express. I'll never forget that day. That there's certain days that are just like melted into your brain, and all of us as a faculty together, ready for the fall season, and the president and provost says, "I know we're all in grief because of our friend Barry," and that's when Laura in the corner said, "The hell," I forget the exact words, but anyways, your friend. Yeah, no, it didn't go over too well. I don't even know how to express it, but they didn't own up to what really happened, unfortunately. But again, we've had, you mentioned a student, David. I've had several students, unfortunately, that have passed. One literally just finished the NC, getting his degree. He was last semester and then he's taking the NCE on a Saturday on his last semester, goes home and literally dies in his bed, and having to deal with that. I've had, students that have had, accidents that we've had to work with. But one in particular that I've always, has stuck with me is a student that I have on tape, actually, and where they were in a techniques class, and they were talking, how we have one's playing the counselor, one's the client 1 week, and this is happening on a Sunday. And the client in this case literally committed suicide the next day. And Tuesday is the day of the class with this videotape.
Well, I kind of wanted to talk about what we had talked about previously, just my irritability, my being short with my husband, just extremely aggravated. I know it's still me. I'm aggravated today. I feel like I'm really distracted. And then part of me I don't want to start a fight, but part of me wants to say what's on my mind, but then the other part of me doesn't want the drama that comes along with it. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm feeling really stuck. And so I've kind of been in a funk, all day, really. So, and actually for a couple of days, there's been a few things that he has said that's just allowed it to really annoy me and get to me. And then I read into everything that he, the meaning behind it. And so I'm just feeling a little stuck today.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a very difficult one. Actually, that the class was actually for was Larry's class, and me and him went to the funeral for the family. But helping the practice counselor in this case that was on the opposite end of that tape was very, very difficult. She struggled throughout her entire program. Anyways, so we've had to navigate quite a bit of things over the years, haven't we all?
Yeah. The student death that really stands out to me the most was such a great guy. He was a Kentucky state trooper and came into the counseling program because he said, I want to serve people in a different way. I don't want to be arresting them. I want to be supporting them. And he had just the disposition, just the person-centered, congruent, and he was shot and killed in the line of duty. It was just shocking and devastating. And, it gets me thinking about ideas around legacy and, how we'll be remembered and what, something going back for one moment to Dr. Donna. If you've been a chair, it's not always easy to find people to teach career counseling. And Donna was all about career counseling, which was great. And I was thinking maybe moving forward, one way to honor her would be a day of career counseling or something involving the students for forever with this program, where we bring people together for hands-on, fun career development kind of things in her honor.
What's interesting, Laura, is, before we even started this podcast, before you got in, David and I were just talking a second, and I'd put a little tribute on Facebook about my aunt, who's, again, in the process of dying right now. And David, you said something along the line of, I hope someone remembers me like I remembered my aunt. And isn't that, part of all of us? I think in some ways, maybe that's why we're in this profession, is we want to be remembered. We want to live eternally through the lives of other people and make a positive impact on lives. And maybe, I don't know, is that who we are? Because I know that is with me. I dream that. I literally dream that not that I'm looking for adorations or anything, but I want to know that I did my best, if that makes any sense.
Well, Marty, you're renowned in the profession, and I think all your students, especially having Victoria here today and your colleague, Laura, and I know other people just speak so highly of you. I don't think that would be an issue. I think I see maybe things a little differently. Some of the people who I perceive want kudos and to be loved. They're trying to compensate. And this is not for you. This is other people who have more of a pathological bent. They are trying to get something from their students that they don't have in their lives. Now, I don't see that with you. I see true love and compassion towards other people. I've known David for how many years, David? 20 years?
30.
30 years. I'm trying to get my hair back too, buddy. So, we've known each other for a long time. I love David. David is just an incredible guy, and I know how he interacts with students. I've got a picture on my door of David and me at an ACA conference where I think it was Pittsburgh, and we're sitting someplace, and somebody took a picture of us. And to love people, the love that our students show towards David and to Laura and you, and we give of ourselves, and I think our students will never forget us. I will never forget my mentors and my dissertation chair, who's still living, thank God. So, but what I'm trying to say is, I think some of the people who pursue this, Martin, pursue it for self-gratification, where they can't get this in their relationships with their partners or whatever it is. But I think more Adlerian type are those of us who really care about other people. And so if you don't love us, that's fine. There won't be like a drop shoe and I'm going to hit you with my other hand. It's the idea that we're here and we want to give. And we thrive on having our students be successful. One of the biggest smiles I get is when I have my doctoral students tell me where they got jobs or tell me about the new jobs they're taking, or when they call me when they have a baby, or when they call me to let me know that they're going to retire. How is it possible my doctoral students can retire and I can't? I still can't figure that out, but I'm really happy for them. And what that says to me is it was a worthwhile experience for them. And I just love that. I really do.
I have the biggest goosebumps. Jerry, thank you for that. That was so sincere and loving. And, a thought keeps coming to mind. I have absolutely no data to back this up, but do counselor educators not retire often? Because I feel like a lot of us, and that's my hope, I feel like I will teach until the day they tap me on the shoulder because I'm making absolutely no sense. And I'm 105 years old. I mean, that is my dream. That is my hope.
Laura, you will always make sense and everybody's going to want you to be there forever. But I think there is a time where I think we start to realize that our words don't come out the way we anticipate and things have changed. I mean, look how our students have changed since the pandemic. Look how we have changed within the professions. And there's a point where we, I'm not saying this for you. I'm just saying, I think there's a point, at least for me, where I'm looking at, is it helpful for me to remain in this profession or possibly more harmful? I mean, my whole background was clinical mental health. I worked in crisis units. I worked crisis response, weekends, evenings. So when I talk about my experience, I don't think my experiences match up much with how my current students do counseling. And I think I've got to be, that's probably for a different podcast. My apologies for that.
No, I look forward to it.
I think my students look at me and go, what the heck is wrong with you? Why would you have done that? Talking about clinical paradox, talking about Milton Erickson, talking about things that I love, but I don't know how relevant maybe it is to 2025.
Jerry, I would argue that is another podcast we need to do. I was just looking at the KCREP standards from the last, since the beginning, even before KCREP, and we do need to talk about that one. So let's put that on the shelf for next time.
Yeah, but Jerry, I bet your students don't feel that way at all.
No, not at all.
I've got I teach on Wednesday nights right now. So I'm an interim chair. And so I get to teach one class. Woo! I'm so excited about when I step in that classroom. And my students are so wonderful. So we had a research symposium. They called it a colloquium yesterday at my university. And I asked my students, if anybody would like to present, I put everybody on the presentation. And my students were so gracious and kind. They were like, oh, Dr. Juhnke, but they went ahead and came. What I think is so neat for me is I see how healthy, how psychologically sound my students are. And that just makes me happy.
When you say that, Jerry, and again, this is maybe another podcast too, but I see faculty in two groups. One.
So do I.
Okay. Well, I mean, it depends on what angle we're looking at it. But in one way, I see the positivity that you create. And then their students have a way of meeting your expectations. And yet I see also those that are very negative and always the students aren't good enough. And oh my God, my program was the best ever, but ours is shit. And they will also raise to the level of their expectations. Does that make sense? Or am I seeing the world differently?
William Perky used to say, students live up to or down to our expectations.
Exactly.
And he never gave tests. He would give these things. He would say, okay, I want you to tell me what you learned in the first half of this course. And when I first started working with him, I thought, man, that's baloney. What are, And he graded very appropriately. I mean, it wasn't an A for that. I mean, people had to really demonstrate that they knew the different theories and how they would use them and the different techniques and the different skills. So it wasn't just an easy thing. Actually, it was I think it was quite difficult because it forced people to think about what I've learned here rather than a multiple choice format. And I do believe our students live up to or down to our expectations of them. And I think that relates back to depth of faculty and students as well. When we have really healthy students, I think their responses are healthier and more appropriate sometimes. So after
about modeling, I'm telling you, it comes down to modeling. The counselor educators need to model what we expect from our students, what we expect them to do for their clients.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think many do not get that yet. But anyways, I know that's another podcast too, but I just had to, let me ask you guys this. When I came into the profession, as a counselor educator, I'd been teaching in various settings, but in general, I was, running a treatment center and all. But when I came in as a full-time faculty member, I actually was replacing a faculty who was dying. And I think you mentioned that too, Jerry, early in our discussion that, you actually, in a sense, I don't know if you considered it a promotion, but, almost got a promotion when somebody was passing away. And I think a lot of us are in those positions. And yet that sort of creates this weird dynamic within ourselves. Anyways, I don't know if anyone wants to speak about that.
That was very hard for me. Thelma Duffy was loved by our faculty, loved by our students. And suddenly I was given the reins, and I'm not a Thelma Duffy. She did things differently than I did. And there's not going to be another Thelma Duffy around.
Can't replace the people. Right.
And I did not feel, and I think this will get to what you're saying. I think my dean wanted me to step in and with a lot of bravado and get people moving and doing these different things. That to me was not the time to set my expectation or my watermark on this program. Instead, I felt really turmoil because you had this great leader who everybody loved. And now I'm stepping into her shoes. And so I wanted to continue what she had done and put a little flavoring of what I do along with it and allow this faculty to kind of figure out the way they wanted to go. Now, what I think might have been easier for some persons and what some people might have wanted was for me to come in with my agenda and make it work. I think that's a lose-lose situation. And fortunately, I was surrounded by an incredible faculty who graciously allowed me to kind of listen to what they were saying and to continue to honor Thelma's direction and what she had done without saying, okay, this is Jerry Juhnke's model now that we're going to do this. I don't think any leader really who comes in and says, this is my model and you're going to do it this way is all that successful. I think you got to listen to your faculty and figure out what you've got to do. At the same time, you're accountable to your associate deans and deans. So, earlier on, and David asked the question, was it fair to ask somebody to terminate somebody during their death? I clearly don't think it is, but I think oftentimes people who are in administrative positions, especially less experienced administrators, the provost tells them what has to happen. And sometimes I think they're in a crunch there as well. And I totally agree with you, Dave. But I think what I have seen, because I'm a former associate dean of graduate school and associate dean anyway, is that this power comes from people who don't know the faculty and they don't know the students. And so they're not emotionally charged with all this stuff. So it's easy for them to say, fire the person. They don't know them. I belong to a big system, University of Texas system. Before that, I was in the University of North Carolina system. I mean, in North Carolina, I knew my chancellor. I would see her on campus. There was a different kind of relation. I never get to see my president here, and I certainly don't can't influence the University of Texas system. Not that they would say anything negative, but if they put pressure on people to say somebody is, has to live up to these or our HR rules, you've got to do such and such. I think the pressure is inordinate on folks. I really do. We're counselors. We're just made differently. I'm sorry, Laura, you probably think I go ahead and took over the conversation. My apologies. Victoria's laughing. She's like, golly, I'm so glad you're not a faculty member of my program.
Oh, no way.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
My head was nodding so hard that I think I have a little injury now, but no, so well said. And that, Marty, write that down as another podcast, how curious it is to be a counselor in an administrative position. And how
very good point. That's a good one. Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I could, so I'm not in a faculty position as of yet, but as a student,
not yet.
Not yet. As a student and as an emerging counseling educator, I think Dr. Juhnke, I've been enjoying your commentary. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And I love listening to your approach of how you stated kind of navigating this sort of awkward, uncomfortable space of kind of stepping in. I know for myself personally, as a student, we appreciate that. We appreciate the authenticity. We appreciate the vulnerability as well as the sensitivity surrounding okay, we're aware that we experienced this devastating loss, but we're proceeding forward with intentionality and honoring the memory of this loved one that we care about, while also staying on track, and being mindful of our end goal. And I think it takes a person with a special capacity to be able to do both. And so I think to just kind of jump into it with okay, moving forward, what's the topic for the module this week? I think students would immediately disconnect. I know I would. I would disconnect from the course in the sense of it will be challenging to kind of navigate through that. But I think even in the incident with, talking about Dr. Pinson, with being a part of her course and her passing away and there being a transition in terms of the instructor, just to brag on Dr. Wesley a little bit, the intentionality that he brought to that transition in the sense of, hey, we're going to talk about it. When we're going to have as many conversations as we need to about it. And let's do a check-in. Let's go around and talk about, how everyone is feeling, what's coming up for you as a student and having to continue taking this course when you just lost your instructor. And that was so impactful for me. It may seem small, but I think in navigating grief, the basic fundamental principle is exhibiting that compassion, showing that you care. And I think earlier, someone made a comment about oh, people don't really know how to respond or people don't really know what to say. And it's well, you don't have to say anything to be compassionate. Your presence in and of itself can be enough just to sit with the person and create room for them to share their experience. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. You just have to make room for people and their experiences. And so as a student, being able to experience that for me, of course, you still sit with the loss. It's still something that we're all processing, but knowing that we have the safety to navigate forward and honor Dr. Pinson's legacy, being intentional with the seeds that she invested in us and our journey thus far, and being able to kind of continue to carry that torch while also having the opportunity to be human and to sit and process what we're feeling in real time.
Yeah.
So well said, Victoria. So well said. I know right after the passing of this beloved lecturer that we had, some of my faculty came to me and said, you know what, I'll pick up that class. I'll run with it. And they're superior instructors. But I ended up choosing some people who might not have been readily anticipated, who are just highly compassionate. I wanted people who would step in and not pick up the reins, but actually be so compassionate. I don't care about grades. I mean, I want all my students to do well, but really at this point, you're not really talking about grades. You're talking about getting people back on the horse so that they can
exactly
again. And so I handpicked, I don't want anybody to say I picked people who were superior. That's not what I'm saying. But they had, because a number of people volunteered, and I specifically didn't choose them, not because they weren't good faculty. They were phenomenal faculty, but I chose people who were very compassionate, and we had clinicians' hearts, and they did a marvelous job. They really did. And the other faculty probably would have been fine too, but I just wanted to create a re-nurturing environment for these students so they wouldn't feel lost. And my big concern was, like I said, I don't care about the grades that much. I wanted them to be successful and to get back on the horse so they could come back fall semester and not be encumbered with maybe a different situation. So
you cared about them being not an A or B student, but you were looking at them being a clinician and a whole human being to be able to help other people. Yeah, I hear you, Jerry. That very well said. I know we've been talking a while, and we're almost here to close. But I wanted to sort of right before we leave, I wouldn't mind asking David one more question, and that's just about our personal mortality. I know, David, that you literally did die, in a sense, was on the table dying. And again, I don't know what kind of insights, and, we don't necessarily need to go into some existential sense of a world beyond, but I'm just curious, just what you learned through that near-death experience. And because I think when we're dealing with death of colleagues or students or friends or family, we can't help but look in the mirror and think, I'm next.
Yeah.
And
when is your turn? So
yeah.
Yes, I died and was resuscitated back to life. And what I saw on the other side, I expected my eyes to go blank, just darkness, but instead a new light opened in my eyes, and I left my body and approached a very loving, pulsating cascade of lights, of which I did not want to return back to this body, but I was resuscitated back simply because that's what doctors do. They're supposed to bring you back. I was very angry with them, and they all laughed at me, of course. But at any rate, what I take away from all of that is that when I do die, for real, I will pass on into that loving home that I left, that I wasn't allowed to join into, because when I approached the light, it felt like I was coming home to something, the home that you always wanted, with loving parents and neighbors and friends. And that's what it felt like to me.
Wow.
So I had no interactions with people or anything like that. Just one individual who pointed me in that way and said, your son is going to be fine. Go that way. And that was it. So,
and you're not a religious person. You're not
I'm becoming more of a
okay, you're going in that direction a little bit, but not necessarily going with any creed or anything. But you're definitely, again, and this is one person's experience, but I truly appreciate you sharing that with us. So.
But before that, I was primarily atheist agnostic, but now that's changed.
Really?
I've done a 180.
David, I want to just thank you. That story, this is the second time in this podcast that I've just had chills all over my body. And I've read quite a bit about those experiences. And what just amazes me is just, regardless of culture, time, race, language, religion, like these experiences have been reported the same way for centuries. And I just really want to thank you for that. I'm gonna reflect on what you said for a long time.
Well, what I would like to do is close with actually a song that we had made for Dr. Donna. And so anyways, I appreciate everyone. It's been a great conversation. And we'll close with that song. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Victoria.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
So good to meet everybody and enjoy you. Thank you so much.
So did I. I didn't know I had such a wise student in my class.
Across the classroom, memories fade. Dr. Donna's light once brightly displayed. In her wheelchair, she taught us to see more than just a world of misery. She whispered hope through every call. Her words a shelter when we fall. With soft compassion, she did impart the strength to mend a broken heart. Farewell, Dr. Donna, you showed us the way. In your wisdom and care, we'll find solace each day. Though you're gone, your spirit remains in every life where kindness reigns. Stony by your side, so true. In every storm, he stood by you. A love so strong through trials unfurled. A beacon bright in a shadowed world. Lessons we hold from your gentle grace. No illness could dare to erase. A counselor, a friend till the end. In every word, you helped hearts mend. Farewell, Dr. Donna, you showed us the way. In your wisdom and care, we'll find solace each day. Though you're gone, your spirit remains in every life where kindness reigns.
You've been listening to the Thera Podcast. If you're a therapist, educator, a counselor in training, or anyone interested in therapy, this is your epicenter for everything you should know. Dr. Martin Wesley and Dr. David Whittinghill are counseling professors and therapists who have endless knowledge and wisdom. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can find our website at www.therapodcast.com. Find the show on all the major podcast platforms. And if you'd like to email Wesley, send it to wesleyphd@gmail.com. Take care and see you next time on the Thera Podcast.